the late 80s and early 90s, interviews with a guy who wrote a book who goes by the name FM 2030. And I'm laughing because, of course, FM probably means, well, we know FTM and what it stands for, right? Female to male or male to female, because these people play roles. Now, I don't know if this guy is a FTM, but he certainly is a government operative who was talking about transhumanism way before anybody really had a clue about it. And I'm going to play for you these clips that aired on Larry King and on CNN, where they were actually covering some of the stuff that he was talking about it as if he was crazy. It's kind of ironic how normalized all these things have become since then. And this guy who is no longer with us, he didn't make it to see transhumanism become the norm, but he's obviously probably cryogenically frozen or already transhuman himself, because clearly he was a government agent at his time here on Earth. He's somebody who I'm covering because he considered himself a quote-unquote global person who was a vegetarian, who would not eat anything that had a mother, all these things that kind of tie in with transhumanism, which is what his book is exactly about. And I'm covering it as well because of the year 2030, because he said all these things would be here in 2030. And how convenient that about a decade ago, the United Nations, which is our world government, which is supposed to serve the purpose of nobody really knows, to be honest with you. You just hear it and you go, oh, it sounds smart. It sounds like people who I don't know much about, who are having a lot of power and control that they shouldn't have. That's exactly what they are. And the year 2030 is very, very interesting, because that's the year that this guy is talking about transhumanism becoming normal, becoming established in our culture and our society. And 2030 is the year, of course, Agenda 2030 with the UN, where they've decided to change the entire world and change what a human being is. So this guy is talking about what a human being is about 30 years ago. And look how much of this stuff has become the new norm in the year 2023 going to 2030.
His name is FM 2030. Really, FM 2030 is the legal name of a California-based futurist whose original name was much more conventional. FM Esfandiari. Under that byline, his work has appeared in such respected publications as the New York Times. Esfandiari changed his name, he says, to affirm his belief that the years around 2030 will be, in his words, a magical time. FM 2030's latest book is Are You a Transhuman? A checklist of change the author is sure is coming in the 21st century. David George reports on the vision of an original and sometimes outrageous futurist.
We began our interview with the man who calls himself FM 2030 at, of all places, a hospital. The same Atlanta hospital where he'd undergone emergency surgery just a few weeks earlier. FM says in the future, hospitals won't just fix our ailing bodies, they'll issue replacements.
We will not only be able to replace very nearly any part, any malfunctioning part of the body, but we'll be able to do something infinitely more, I think, exciting. And that is, we just give the person a new body.
Whole body.
Yeah, replacement body.
One fell swoop or piece by piece?
Well, either way, and probably both ways.
FM says the number of people walking around today with transplanted organs, artificial limbs, and synthetic body parts is proof that the ultimate makeover is only a matter of time.
You know, if we are able to build bridges and ships and even buildings that last for hundreds of years, why can't we build bodies that can last for hundreds of years? Or bodies that can be easily jettisoned or easily replaced? And I believe we will.
But won't that increase the strain on a world already running out of room? FM 2030 says there's plenty of room left on Earth, thanks to technology that makes it possible for humans to build cities in the deserts and outposts at the poles and to live almost anywhere we want. And then there's always space.
In the coming years and decades, we will spread out across first near Earth space, low orbital, Earth orbital, obviously lunar things, Martian colonies, and so forth, and later deep space, meaning beyond Mars. So space is really not a problem.
Keeping in touch across the miles won't be a problem either if FM 2030's vision of the future comes true. He says satellite technology has already created the beginnings of what he calls a telesphere world, in which people won't just talk, they'll teleconnect.
If one is teleconnected, one is plugged in, then there is no far or near. And what this is doing is recontexting the architecture of life on this planet.
Teleconnection, he says, will mean more and more of us working outside the plant or office. He concedes some jobs, the ones that require the worker to be there hands-on, will still exist, though in fewer numbers, as machines take over more and more of what passes for work in the 20th century.
But the need to drive to work every day, several hours there and then drive back, etc., that will probably phase out. In fact, I'm sure it will phase out. Thanks again to telecommunication.
Driving anywhere will be easier in the 21st century, FM 2030 says, thanks to cars with onboard navigation systems and highways with computerized traffic control. If that sounds like an old idea, it is.
Safe distance between cars is maintained by automatic radio control.
It's been around at least since this movie was shown at the World's Fair in 1939. More than 50 years, and we haven't followed through yet.
That's right, we still haven't. Well, in part because the automobile was not such a heavy presence. It was not an intrusive thing. But now we have reached the saturation point, and I think we're going to begin doing something about it.
FM 2030's primer on how to prepare for life in the 21st century contains checklists you can use to gauge how ready you are for life in the future. Though some readers may never be ready for the author's dismissive view of traditions and rituals. Here's what he says about weddings.
Wedding ceremonies, these are rituals that allow two people to announce to the world that they now belong to each other. Weddings would be more honest if the bride and bridegroom peed on each other to establish their territory. Keep out, everybody, this is now my property. The idea is that we're moving away from ritual and from exclusivity and territoriality. We're growing more and more fluid, more and more global, more and more mobile.
And in the process, less and less human? FM 2030 says yes.
The fact that we're no longer of this planet only, and the fact that we're no longer confined to these bodies, leads me to foresee a time, very short, very, very short, I'd say in the coming 2-3 decades, when in fact by no stretch of imagination, by no stretch of definition can anyone be called human. We are already trans-biological, trans-solar beings, and therefore we are transhuman. And even transhuman is not our final destination. It's just a transitional phase from the human to something infinitely more advanced, infinitely more refined, infinitely more sophisticated, and that is the post-humans of the middle of the 21st century.
Is FM 2030 putting us on? Maybe, maybe not. We'll find out for sure.
See, we're going to tiptoe into the future with FM 2030 next. Don't go away.
Coming up, are you ready for the 21st century?
Our next guest is the author of Are You a Transhuman? It is published by Warner Books. There you see it's titled, the book that unveils the coming decades and reveals how ready you are to enter them. The author is our guest, FM 2030. Omni Magazine says he's a true visionary, daringly original. You actually changed your name, huh?
I have, because I changed, Larry. You know, I'm not who I was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So
Why did you pick a name with letters and numbers?
Well, first of all, I'm a person who's not involved in the past. I like to think of myself as someone who lives the future. And I wanted a name that evokes the future, a name that evokes my dreams and hopes and visions. And I thought 2030 was a neat name, yeah. Well, at that time, let's say 40 years from now, a whole lot of things that are beginning to happen now, like, for example, life extension, or colonization, or solar satellites, the ability to, for example, change season and have sunlight anytime, anywhere. All of these things will by then have crystallized. So it's a very exciting time.
You are not saying by taking this name that we will be named that way.
No, not at all. I think we will have no greater latitude and flexibility. People will not remain stuck with their old names.
But we'll have our heritage. That'll remain. The heritage will remain, won't it?
I think we'll be less and less preoccupied with heritage. Already we are less and less hereditarian than ever before. We're more and more future-oriented. It matters less and less where we came from. I mean, we all came from ancestors who swung from trees. But what matters is where we're going.
What do you mean by the title, transhuman?
It means the stage beyond the human. This very day, there are scientists who, through, let's say, biological engineering and genetics and robotics and what we call transgenesis and so forth, creating the beginnings of what will eventually be life forms more advanced, more refined, more evolved than us humans, including ourselves, by the way, Larry.
Do you say that if we are not into the computer, we are lost? That we have to be into the electronic age, or we're dwindling?
One of the self-tests here, remind you, this book is comprised of self-tests, which I developed, by the way, in my seminars for UCLA Extension, where I teach, and also for seminars for professional people and business people and so on. One of the self-tests asks, what kind of technology do you use? How teleconnected are you? What kind of, for example, high-tech systems do you have in your home? Do you have at work?
And if you're not teleconnected, what does that mean?
It means that you live a low-tech life.
And is that bad?
Well, it can be, in that it does not maximize your efficiency or your effectiveness. For example, it does not help open up a lot of leisure time. Where in Southern California, where I live, a lot of us are teleconnected. We go to the beach, for example, and we connect from wherever we are. At the beach in Santa Monica or by poolside, and you conduct your business that way.
We're going to live longer, obviously. What do you say, 150 years will be?
I'd say if you're around in the year 2010, there's a very, very good chance that you will be around in the year 2030. If you're around in 2030, there's an excellent chance you can coast to immortality. Indefinite lifespans. Mind you, Larry, not with these bodies, and certainly not on this planet only.
Jesus, we just missed.
No, we haven't.
In the breath of lifetime, we missed.
Some of us will miss. And I think it matters less and less how old we are. It's for example, one of the self-tests here asks, how immortality-oriented are you? The fact is that we are, making gains, as you well know, in the area of life extension, but many people are just not tuned in. They still have bad lifestyles.
You look into the future all the time. That's what you do for a living.
Exactly.
What don't you like? What do you see that you don't like?
That it's not happening fast enough.
How about, you call for, you think relationships will be bi-coastal, trans-global, but people go to Japan in 2 hours?
Well, yes, we will have what are called hypersonic aircraft, for example, space planes, which will whiz us across the planet in anything like an hour or two. We have the very beginnings of them. We have models, working on them.
Are we going to look Star Trekian? Are they going to have those kind of things? Global things, interplanetary landings?
I think we will be infinitely more imaginative and more exciting. And I think our biological bodies will be, for example, more durable, more imaginative. We will certainly travel across the solar system. By 2030, for example, there will be, I'm sure, hundreds of thousands of people living across the solar system.
What is this going to do to family and love and relationships? That going to change?
It's interesting. A lot of people are very territorial. We're territorial organisms. And although a lot of people accept the fact that there are changes going on all tracks, like in the economy, in decision-making processes, and technology and values, people have difficulty accepting the fact that changes are occurring in the home as well. And that's where I get a lot of my flack. And one of the self-tests here asks, how family-oriented are you? The fact is that, we are less and less family-oriented. We're less and less impelled by biology, biological connections. And we're moving towards spontaneity and voluntarism in relationships. We're less and less hereditarian.
There's still going to be sex.
Oh, absolutely, for a long time to come.
Good news, FM. Our guest is FM 2030. The book is Are You a Transhuman? You test yourself about your ability to cope with tomorrow because it's coming faster than you think. It's published by Warner Books. We'll take some calls. If I say FM, am I calling you by your first name?
FM is fine.
Let's take some calls for F. That's real important. Right after these words. We're talking about tomorrow with FM 2030. Washington, hello.
You don't think there'd be a possibility that knowledge from UFOs will be used in the future?
UFOs, we're going to learn about them?
Well, I think we're going to, with this very day, we're signaling across the Milky Way, and as we move out into the solar system, I think the opportunities for reaching out across the galaxy and across interstellar space and attempting to make contact are increased. I don't really believe in, that there is a likelihood that these UFOs are really real.
Wouldn't they have contacted us already?
I think they would have handled us in better ways than this.
I would think. Lawrence, Kansas, hello.
Larry, hi. Mr. 2030.
Just 2030.
2030. I'd like to ask you, as a futurist, when do you think the government will stop spending these billions and billions of dollars on what they hope will be useless military defense items and start putting it
What's going to happen to things like war?
Well, I had hoped you were going to say what will happen to government. Governments are going to phase out. In fact, as we move toward decentralization of authority, of power, of influence, of wealth, you see that the power of central government, for example, right here in the United States, is continuously eroding. Some of the greatest changes in this country in the last 25 years, the women's movement, the civil rights movement, the consumer movement, the environmental movement, the youth movement, the sexual revolution, etc., etc., all these were spearheaded by people outside government. The administrations during which these mass movements occurred were able to do very little to stop them.
Are we going to
The
see?
point is, the power is really.
Are we going to see the end of nationalism?
I think we're moving toward the global age. Absolutely.
Florence, South Carolina, for FM 2030. Hello.
That 2030 is not even on the FM dial. And we'd like to know what FM to address that.
Does it have any meaning?
Well, it stands for me. It stands for future model, future anything. It really has to do with the future.
Futurists, how do they? This is an educated guess, right? You don't know this is going to happen, do you? Or what tells you it's going to happen?
No, but you know, Larry, we have developed, since the last time, for example, I was on your show, we have refined and fine-tuned methodologies for changes. We're understanding the change better and better. Just to give you a quick example, our weather forecasts at one time, let's say 25 years ago, were very inaccurate. 10% accuracy in the early 60s. Today, they're 90% accurate. Give us supercomputers, in about 10, 15 years, we'll be able to make projections for climatic changes. By the same token, we have genetic profiles where we will one day be able to predict earthquakes. We are able to predict, for example, demographic changes and so forth. We have developed methodology and we have the technologies to anticipate changes.
Things are predictable.
Absolutely.
Toronto, hello.
Yeah, hi, Larry. I want to ask FM 2030. I'm the owner of the oldest tavern in Toronto, Canada, and I want to know what a burger and a pint of beer is going to cost in that year.
What year is this, 2030?
Yeah.
Well, I think in 2030 we will have we're already going to the cashless society, to electronic funds and so forth. I believe there will come a time, perhaps around 2030, maybe 2040, when in fact the whole imperative of money will begin to lose validity, will lose viability. Mind you, this is a whole lot of things will have happened by then. We will have opened up new resources, new raw materials from space, from the moon, from this planet itself. We will have plugged into the sun, which sits 93 million miles away, generated that puts out 4 million tons of energy and of matter every single second. So we're moving toward an age of post-fossil fuel abundance.
We'll be right back with our remaining moments with FM 2030. Are you a transhuman? If there's an Eastern strike tonight, we'll talk about it at length Monday night on Larry King Live with representatives of both parties. We'll be right back. Angelo, Texas for FM 2030. Hello.
Yes, will genetic mutations have an effect on the future?
Of course, biological engineering, recombinant DNA, we're at the very beginning of it. In fact, this year or last year, we began what is called gene therapy. We're beginning to replace some faulty genes.
Doesn't that scare you?
But mind you, not at all. In fact, it encourages me because we will be able to correct a whole lot of diseases. We'll be able to prevent a lot of diseases.
We're going to create life?
We're going to create new life. But you know, we ourselves, many of us, millions and millions of us around, will be around by the time we attain immortality, physical immortality, 30, 40 years from now. I mean, 30 years ago, people like me, we would make projections. There would come a time when there'd be tens of millions of people over the age of 65, and nobody believed us. You know, like this is neither already happening. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. Pleasure.
FM 2030.
So that's how many things in there could we look at? You can all leave comments in the comment section where this guy's literally predicting the future. Now, of course, he's not predicting the future. The reason he knows this is because this is all scripted. This is all planned. This isn't something that just happened organically. Oh, we're going to get to that point. This is conditioning. His book, the reason he's on Larry King, the reason he's being promoted on CNN, they're all tied in together, right? They get these guys who sound like biotechnicians or scientists and engineers, and what they're really doing is controlling human beings and what they're going to be. Even then warning about how robots and transhumanism would eliminate jobs, and everybody sounds like a great idea. Yeah, we're going to lose jobs. Yay, we're going to lose. Humans are going to become the second-rate species unless, of course, human beings merge with technology. And that's exactly where we're headed. And that's, people become so desensitized, they think that it's normal, it's cool. And they're going to be convinced, they're going to be proud of this. They're going to be loving the fact that they have technology inside of their bodies. 30 years ago, you could see the pushback. Now, Larry King, of course, rest in Bagelville, Larry, with your big schnoz. Of course, Larry was on the in because we all know who this stems from, creating the perfect race, right? Genetically modifying human beings. So you can look at some of the clips from those videos and laugh about how dated the technology looks. But the frightening part of it is that they were telling us about this a long time ago. And if you've seen some of the videos I've done even recently, where I put in Metropolis, where you can see even in Metropolis back in, the 20s, 30s, 40s, they were talking about this stuff even in silent films, about mixing man and machine. And now, all they needed to do over the years wasn't to perfect the science. It was to perfect the mind control of how they could get people to do this, to accept this as the new norm, and to want this, right? That's what it's been about. Psychologically desensitizing you, convincing you, not about them going, can we do it? Are we ever going to get to that point? They've been able to do it for quite some time. They've been able to clone it for quite some time. They've been able to modify human beings for quite some time. Now it's about convincing you to do it. So, coincidence that the guy's name happens to have the year 2030 in it? And of course, 2030 and Agenda 2030 are all about this. That's what it's all about. It's all about, the Great Reset is about resetting humanity. It's not just about the things that I've discussed about killing off the economy, killing our food supply chain, ending the consumption of meat. It's not just about those things. It's about you. It's about changing and resetting what a human being is. And the only way they can do that is by getting inside your body. And the only way they can do that is if you allow them to. And guess what? A lot of people don't even realize that they're already allowing them to. And it's only going to get worse. I thank everybody for being here. Let me know what you thought of this in the comment section. But I thought it was pretty fascinating, pretty funny as well. Always like watching some of those older clips. They're a good reference point to tell you that this isn't some new type of conspiracy thing. We've all been warning about it. Other people have been talking about it, right? And now with the internet, we can go back and see some of the stuff that they've mentioned to us in the past that are now becoming true. And of course, the year 2030 wasn't by coincidence. It's because he's in the know. His job was to come out and normalize this stuff even 30, 40 years ago, right? They knew 2030 was the goal then, and we're getting closer to 2030. But people will see it and be like, why did he even renamed himself to this? Well, he's a government agent. There's no trace of who this guy's real identity even is, right? They name change. Some of the stuff even in his Wikipedia read about him, right? He published a book called Optimism One, as in One World Global Government. Started going by the name FM 2030 for two main reasons: to reflect the hope and belief that he would live to celebrate his 100th birthday in 2030. Secondly, and more importantly, to break free from widespread practice of naming conventions that he noted as a collectivism mentality. Yeah, this won't be a collective mentality. This will only be a hive mind, all these people who are connecting themselves with technology And he goes, he viewed traditional names as almost ways of stamping a label of collective identity varying from gender to nationality on the individual, thereby existing as prima facie elements of thought process in the human cultural fabric that tended to degenerate into stereotyping, fictionalism, and discrimination. In his own words, conventional names define a person's past, ancestry, ethnicity, nationality, religion. I am not who I was 10 years ago, and certainly not who I will be in 20 years. So these are things that he said, right? And now think about the stuff we live with now, how they've brainwashed people into all this stuff. There's no genders anymore. You know, you can change your name. You know, there's, you know, names can't be based on gender. This is all stuff that they've tied in. This has to do with transhumanism. It's more, you know, it's more than what we hear from like the Daily Wire talking about, you know, trans culture and all this stuff, culture wars. This isn't about culture wars. This is about transforming human beings, not just on the outside, on the inside, turning humans into something that is completely not what they were, you know, created by God to be, to modify your code so that you're no longer human, that you no longer belong to God. That's what this is about. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you're all doing well. God bless you as always, and your families.
We're about to update each other's Hinge profiles. Let's listen to hers first, what I did for hers.
Hey, hi to all the Hinge boys that are listening to this. I'm giving you reasons why you should date my